here it is. It's working. Cool. I'm wondering if all of this is stuff I absolutely need. Maybe I'll want to close something, but I don't know. I guess I do want all that open. Anyway, maybe I don't need. Yeah, I don't need this, I guess. Alright, so let's see. I got into a little discussion. Well, first of all, no, I'll just get right to it. I got into this little discussion on Twitter today because I've done a few things now in 4coder that involve laying stuff out on a screen, and got into a little discussion about it. And someone asked if I could show the code that I'm talking about, explain exactly with a proof of concept sort of thing. So I guess I'll start by just showing what exactly the system is. So in action. So it's about 2D layout. I was talking about how sort of HTML and LaTeX style layout things are really awful seeming to me because well, I'm not sure what exactly causes them to not work, but it's just I can do a lot. I seem to have a lot more flexibility when I'm doing the same problem in C, just to lay something out here. So there's this thing. This UI uses a variation of the layout thing I'm talking about. With this thing, the idea is simply that you have a sort of a layout engine. Both of them are based on this simple concept that you basically have all sorts of things you want to put on the screen, and you want to give them and to put them on the screen, you give an absolute location of where it should show up, and then separate from that, you have a system that determines where to put things on the screen, and then I'm not sure, in my head, one thing that maybe sounds like is that the advantage is that it decouples the information from the layout, but that's not totally true because it's not. I mean, if you make a layout in HTML that does work, you can basically put anything in there. Well, that's not totally true. Like if you get to a point where you put in a much larger piece of text in the same spot, things can get where you used to have a small piece of text, things can get weird. So I don't know, maybe that's a part of it, but it seems to me that it's more about declarative versus not declarative. That's what I think makes this easier to do, is that it's not sort of a declarative, it's not totally declarative like an HTML situation. So basically, each of these items is do a label right here, do a style preview, and then it begins a row and does 3 items in that row, and does another label, and then it does more style previews. And if I click on a style preview, it gets tied to a certain action that's sort of more I am GUI, or maybe not I am GUI, maybe it's just GUI, is what I should call that. But if I click on this top one, it takes me to this, which also has a layout going on, and again, it's just do items. And right now, it's all vertical layout, so that means each item, basically every time I do an item, it advances the Y down. But that's not necessarily true. Like this thing here, if I do import, you can see that this lays 2 things out in this row, this lays 2 things out in this row, and so on. This just happens to not have any buttons or items in rows. The other thing that this has is that the width is totally flexible. So the height is fixed on each item. The width is flexible, and you can see it even if I shrink it too small, it starts adjusting the text that it's even showing. So the width is flexible, and if you click on one of these, it does all of this. So these they fill a span. If I shrink them down and they get too small, it doesn't do anything about that, which maybe you'd say is an issue, but it's no matter what you do, the word palette's not going to fit in that space. So really the solution to that is to switch to icons or set a minimum width or something like this that doesn't allow you to get that small, if you even care about that. And so then these buttons span across that width, and then these things sort of go down this panel space here. I don't know what to call it. This rectangle gets set up as a space to lay things out, and then 3 sliders show up, and each slider, again, it takes up the whole width. So if I stretch this, you can see the gradient sort of stretches and shrinks, and it lays out vertically. Again, so that's again not having more than one thing on a row. This one does have more than one thing per row. These 3 things all fit into a row, but the way I did this isn't actually the same. The way I did this actually works differently than the way things like these tabs up here work. This tab says we're going to do a row, and then once we begin the row, in C I just tell it that there's going to be 3 items in the row. If you were going to make a layout language, you would probably have a way of saying, hey, here's all the items that are going to be in that row, and then it will look and count them ahead of time and figure out how many there will be. If you want that to be dynamic, it's still not that hard. It's just a matter of, since I was just writing literal code, the easiest simple thing for me to do was put the 3 there in hard code. So it's a little bit of an inflexibility to my particular variation here. And then what these do isn't quite the same. It's not like I say begin a row and then I divide that up into 3 things. What I actually did here was I took this whole space and I did the division first, and then these are like subdivisions. So this section does 1, 2, 3. This section does 1, 2, 3. And I did that. I'm not sure why I did that way. I could probably lay it out the other way too, but I just didn't. This one is totally different, and I need, like, if I was at full screen, you'd see that all that fits in perfectly fine. Not sure why I'm not at full screen actually. And so the idea here is, again, in this case it actually lays out vertically first, which isn't too hard to just switch to. It's the same principle. I haven't actually compressed the code, so this uses a different function to do the layout than everything else, but it wouldn't have to. I just haven't finished compressing all of this. And these 2 are laid out vertically, but then the idea is, and you can tell they're laid out vertically, by the way, because if they were laid out horizontally, there wouldn't be a gap here. There would be 2 gaps here, because they like fill this way, and the last 2 gaps would end up here, but this actually fills down, and that last column only has 2 items. So, yeah, the way that works is basically I just take this whole section and I say I want to begin doing a sub layout in here, and then so you sort of, I guess it's not just taking a position, it's taking a rectangle as a part of the idea. You say, here's a rectangle, I want to fill it up with some graphical user interface items, and I'll get to showing you the code for that too in a minute. But then I just say, like, here's my layout scheme, I want to move down, and when that column gets full, move to the next row and start at the top. And then I just list all the things that I want to, all the data, like all the items that I want to show just get listed, and the layout system just puts them in there. So that's basically all there is for this. Now the thing that's new, this is not like a feature of 4coder so much like that I'm distributing so much as it's my sort of internal window into things going on in 4coder. If I switch to this one, it shows like keystrokes and stuff like that, and it shows mouse information. So like if I put the mouse outside of the client section, it goes red, and I've already realized like that I have to do work, so I don't really like the fact that those numbers stop changing. It explains a bug I wasn't able to understand one time. I should have like realized that, I just didn't. And then, you know, I can detect left and right, and there's a great thing where if I am like, I'm pressing left and I go off, it doesn't come off, so that's good to know. And I've got my scroll wheel there, which, seeing that it was 1, -1, also good info. But about the layout, the way this works is a little different, but same basic idea, that you're going to, basically you're putting something on the screen, you give it the absolute position where you want it on the screen, and then you use a flexible layout system to choose where that goes so that it can flex. Now this one does not have anything that adjusts to width or height like the other one did. The other one had things that filled spans, that subdivided into certain sections, and so on. This one doesn't have that, but this one solves a different problem, and you could easily combine the two. I just haven't needed to yet, and this is more an ad hoc thing since it is just sort of my debug view. But as I would continue to work on the UI base, I'll probably want my UI to have the features that I showed off in the theme picker, as well as the feature I'm about to describe here, which is that it does all the code for this first, so this whole keyboard section, and then it does the code for the mouse section. And the way it does this layout is basically to first I wonder if you can, how well you can see that. It might be a little weird looking because my colors are actually a little dim in a lot of places. Basically for when things are off, they get kind of dim. But anyway, so what this basically does is I start at the top left corner and I say, okay, I want to lay things out. First it lays things out horizontally, and then it lays the next row out horizontally, and so to do that it puts x back to the beginning, not to 0, but to whatever like the left hand side of this panel is. And it does it again, right? And it advances the y down was the thing I was going to mention, and then does it again. Each time it advances the y down by one line, like one height of the font line, and then when that is going on, it sort of gets done, and like you can see, it doesn't actually take up that much horizontal space. So if I just kept using that, my mouse stuff would all be down here below this. And if I, let's see, I guess I don't actually have an official way to close my debug panel. So if you see here, it would also, like, when I haven't done that much typing yet, while the debug panel is open, it hasn't captured that many keystrokes yet. It only shows like the Alt-D that I did to open the panel and the O that I did to switch to this particular mode in the debug view. And it captured those. So it's gone down 3 lines. It hasn't even filled up its like ring buffer of keystrokes yet, so it doesn't know that that like it's going to eventually get to a certain. It doesn't. Right now, when it does this loop, it only does these 3. So when y is right here, it doesn't have the full. It's not all the way down where it would be when this thing is full. So as I type this thing, you can see that just caused it to bump this over to the right a little bit. This thing though would get pushed down. All right, so right there, and then if I hit tab, you can see it, which does the, or not tab, is that caps lock causing that? Yeah, caps lock, that makes sense. Okay, there we go. So if I type something like backspace, you can see that again, that's just causing it to move around a lot. Which is, again, my point. As it's going down, it keeps track of the max width. And right there, it looks like the max width is wrong, but that's because space does count as having width. But basically, after each row is done, it says, oh, what's the maximum width of this whole set of items? So this set of items is considered one sort of bigger group of items, and it keeps track of. So the nice thing about this is that you can have ideas of items that have a fixed height, that you know the height before you render the item. They can have a fixed width, you know the width before you render them. They could have variable width, so in this case, you don't know how wide it's going to be until you've rendered it, and then you find out. And they could have variable height. Also, in this case, you don't know how high this group of items will be until you render it. So you know how high one item of this is, one row of this, but you don't know how high the set is going to be until you're done rendering it. Or like putting it on the screen or whatever it is, right, until you're done doing it. But that's fine. What you just do is you say, okay, this whole thing is like a super row, and I keep track make my super row of the max x of this whole block, and then this whole block begins at that position. And basically, if you want to have like infinite nesting, you would just do a stack where the top item in the stack is, or the stack has an x and a y, and the top item is the xy where you're going to put the next thing. And you are either advancing along a row or a column at any given time. So you would say, if you're advancing along a row, it would just add to the x, so the next thing would show up to the right of that. And then every time you say, done with this particular row, go down 1, right? So that's like, these are small items embedded in a row, which are items embedded in like a single column of this super row, right? So it's just like a stack thing. As soon as you're done with this row, you say put x back to 0, but before you put x back to 0, record that and see if that was the larger than the largest x we've seen so far, so that by the time you're done, you know how large and along x and y this whole block is. So I don't really see any problem with that if that's the kind of layout you want, and then you just whenever you want to do another subsection, you push onto the stack, and when you're done, you pop in the maxes whatever is below you in the stack. That's basically the idea. So let me get into the code for that a little bit. I'll start with this color view one. So the idea is pretty simple. I have, for the most part, the entire UI consists of only a few, like, okay, so basically, there's the UI state, which is everything you kind of need, like information you need for doing rendering and layout info, like fonts, you know, how high your rows are, or how high your lines are, mouse information, keyboard information, etc. The rendering target, the thing you have to actually do your rendering. All this is just so you can actually do the stuff that your UI needs to do. This is sort of more of the state of the UI in terms of it knows what the UI has been doing recently, who's being hovered on, who's the currently selected item, and so on. And it also, let's see, yeah, that's all. Okay, and then height and view height. So this is keeping track of, for the color view stuff, for like this particular UI, I have vertical scrolling, because everything is basically, I said, has fixed height and fills width, right? So whatever width it has, it fills the width, but each item has a fixed height, which means the span you have might not be enough, in which case you keep track of how high the whole thing is, and you just keep track of where you are scrolled to. So basically, in any given, like I was saying, if you want to make it completely general, in any given section, you would want to know, is this thing advancing by X or Y in this particular layer of the hierarchy, and then you would want to keep track of, do the items in here have fixed width or fill width, or like fill height or fixed height. And if they're filling the whole span, then you don't really need scrolling, or if you do need scrolling, it's because you're trying to fit too many things anyway, and then like fixed would have been better, right? If you don't think that you're going to very often be in a situation where you can't fit like 3 items there and you just want to fill it, then you don't really need scrolling. So yeah, I think that's where you make those decisions, but the system would know, okay, here we're doing fill span items, or here we're doing fixed size items. And if you're doing fixed size items, then you need the scroll bar. That's all that is. That's all there is to that. Which is weird. Anyway, is there anything else? Oh yeah, the layout system. So to do layouts, like this is just keeping track of UI stuff. In this particular one, like I said, I just keep track of how many items do I expect to put in a row, because this was coded knowing consciously that what kind of layout I wanted. Like I said, you could conceive of doing this generally, so that you could have variable width x and y, or fixed width x and y, with scroll bars. And this particular one knew that it was going to be fill width. So I keep track, so I know I'm filling rows, so that's why the layout knows how many items are going to be in this row, or how many items are going to be in this row that haven't actually been put into the row yet. The width of each item, because like I said, I sort of pre-compute the width. I say there's going to be 3 items in this row, and then the next 3 items I do all fit inside the row. Once I finish the 3rd item, it knows that row is done, and then it advances to Y. If I don't tell it I'm about to begin a row, it just assumes that there's 1 item in that row, fills the whole thing, and then advances to Y. And this max item height here says, if I put several items into this row, keep track of, again, which one has the max height, and then just make sure the whole section is treated as having that height when the thing does the Y advance. It's like super basic. I mean, like, this sort of stuff is supposed to be available in HTML. I think the whole point is that if you have control over, like, if you can just code directly the logic of your layout system, you can get anything you want. That's the reason I like this. Because like in HTML, they just provide for you several ways of declaring certain types of layouts. Whereas if they just said, hey, you just need to implement a system of logic on when you put an item in, how does the layout system figure out based on the size of that item and where it was previously, and like other types of state you might have put into this layout system however you wanted, how does it figure out what the next position should be in the layout, right? If you can just get in there and code for yourself that positioning system, everything becomes easier. I think that's the reason I like this better. Not that I'm sort of getting into it. The other part is debug, and I want to finish this up so we can get to the tree generated. Let's see. Where is a good example? So I want to look at draw os events because that's the most complicated version. So this one I haven't even really distilled into a proper system yet. Like the separation doesn't even exist totally. I do have the draw, like even draw modifiers itself is like a thing that does put something in a position, but while it's putting it in a position, it's using the layout system. That's why you pass it a pointer to the x. And that's another thing is like when you say do this item at this position, that can be like that item could involve beginning a subsection, like beginning the next level of hierarchy, so that the layout you push onto the stack of layout, and then you inside that item do other items in absolute positions throughout that item, right? So one item is a composite of several others. That's basically what this is. Okay, yeah, so exactly the way this works is it starts with an X and a Y at the top left corner, and it does a draw modifiers, which uses X to put in 3 strings. These 3 strings, after each time it does those in a loop, after each time it does one of those, it updates X by this amount. Basically the width of the string plus 5 more. So that's how it updates X. And then at the end, Y will be in the same spot, X will be farther to the right. Then I keep track of the max X. And so like this right here, I'm basically limiting myself to like 2, or I don't know how exactly you would count it. I have to think about it because you have super rows. Inside of each super row, you have a block with rows. It's like 4 layers. Basically, this allows for 4 layers of hierarchy. If you were doing a stack, you would actually use twice as much memory because you would have like an X stack, an X layer, and then the Y layer would have a lot of duplicate data, but maybe you could get away from that by just having one and knowing, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if you could get as much density from like 4 variables in a generalized system. But either way, the concept is pretty much the same here, that this represents one layer of the stack, and this is, I haven't even used max Y yet for anything, so I don't have 2 super rows, as I've been calling them. But because I'm not using a generalized system, this is sort of limited to just having rows of blocks, and inside each block is a row of items of variable width. But it's all, like when you go to put something on the screen, it doesn't matter what the width or height of any of those outlayers are, because it just figures that out as it's going. But it sort of takes this max X, and then it uses that max X again down here, so that whenever it's doing more of the item, more of those keys, it updates max X as needed, and then max X is what it uses to figure out the location of the next thing. So this mrect here is basically where I say what's the new position of the rest of this row, and that is whatever this was plus the offset given by max X. and then I set max y. And if I did several of these items, what I would do is each time I did one of these big blocks, I would update max y in this manner. Then eventually I could advance the whole thing down to max y and start a new super row there. That's just there in case I ever want to do that. To demonstrate that, I'll just throw in a quick demo of that to finish this up. So the idea is if max y ends up being less than y at the end of that, then max y equals y. And then you would probably say, okay, after that, do this stuff again, right, basically. So x equals mrect. Actually, that wouldn't be true. That would be max x. And that would not be max y, that would be mrect y0. So that's where there's like different layers in the stack. And then this in here would have to keep track of a max x, which it's not doing right now. But I could, like, if this was a generalized system, it could be keeping track of max x. But let's just say that we get to there and we say, all right, we're gonna update that, and the fact that I don't have anything after that block means I don't need to know the max x. If I have this block is if I have a set of blocks, but the last block doesn't have anything after it, it's the last block, I don't need to know the width of that one because I'm not putting anything after it. The only time I would need to know the width of it is if I was trying to make like a table so that everything had the same width in a column, which then gets a little bit more difficult than, like, you couldn't necessarily do that with this because you'd kind of need to pre-compute the widths of everything. You could still do it. You could still do it in a sort of similar way. It would just involve a little more work. But I'm not sure how often you actually want layouts like that, especially when doing HTML or LaTeX. That's not really the way I've ever laid things out, at least not for a while. I guess I do some tables in HTML sometimes. Matrices, if you ever lay out a matrix. I'd have to think about the best way to manage that here. It seems like, because I mean, this already works in 2 passes, so the first pass just would be for figuring out the width and height of each row and column, and then when you draw them, you're just pulling that out of the layout system would say, okay, when we did the first pass, we figured out the x and y of each element, which we didn't figure out until we got done running through it, but we figured it out, and now we know, and when you go to draw it, you can put them in the right spot. It just takes 2 passes instead of 1 to do the same thing, if I'm thinking it through correctly. Anyway, I'm going to quickly draw a rectangle at 2r with the x of mrect, of rect x0, max y, rect x1, max rect y1, and I'll give it the color blue. Now you can see I've got this big blue rectangle here, and if I start typing, it fills in. Let me do that again because I didn't quite pull it off the way I wanted to. Okay, so you can see right now that the blue rectangle is being controlled, like the height of it is being controlled by that. And then if I type enough, it starts to shrink down because this super row here got taller as this thing got taller. So that's basically the idea. Like, the table situation is maybe the only kind of weakness, but I think that's just a matter of passing through twice or predefining your table. Like, if you know how much space you have, maybe, I mean, a lot of tables, a lot of the time, you don't let it base the rows width and height based on what's in the table anyway. You just predefine it, in which case this still works. That's what you code for the layout system in that case, is you say, when I ask for the next thing, look at the definition of width and height of each row and figure out where that is. So the only way that would be hard is if you were trying to have variable width items in a table that the max width and height of each row and column became the width and height of the rows and columns. And even then, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Alright, let me switch over to the tree thing. Gotta be done within the next 30 minutes or so. Huzum asks, is there any reason for this old school Win95 design? A rational one. Probably not on this computer, because this computer is extremely better than my laptop. But before I had this computer, I was on my laptop. My computer ran much faster with this than over Arrow and the other like fancy themes. When I switched to this, a lot of things became faster. I just got used to that, and because it's faster, like even though I know this machine could probably handle Arrow, it's still gonna be slower. It's just not so much slower that it matters, but I like faster either way. So since I know that it's faster, I just run it. The disadvantage is that a few things like don't capture as well on this. Like OBS, for example, doesn't always pick everything up on this, which some people have said would work better if I was in Arrow. So I know there is that disadvantage, but I don't really mind it. Right, so now I want to run 4coder for reals, and we can get to it. Colors, code. Okay, so last time, basically I was derailed by a memory corruption bug, which is fixed now, and I can't really remember where the project was. I think I was still working on getting this whole skeleton and width thing separated. So let's see if we can get back to that. Well, first of all, does it build right now? Maybe that would give me a show skeleton is not a member of AppVars. Line 290 of app color. Okay. 290. Show skeleton is not a member of AppVars. They said 190. Whoops. 190. Oh, you know what I want to do? I need to go change something real quick in 4coder custom. Alright. Clean and save. No. I did that, and I've realized since that it's kind of way too buggy to actually be useful, because the clean function is messed up right now, the clean command, so I'll just do save for now. In case you're wondering what that was, bind to me is a new function in the custom layer that lets you bind to your own function, and clean and save, and then the way you actually make that do stuff is you can call just a series of commands, so you can basically just composite commands. That's what that does. Okay, I've forgotten. Oh, I gotta pull this up. Boing. There we go. Alright. Back to it again. No more distractions. Alright, app color. Tree gen. Okay, so I was looking for line 190. Okay, not line 190 so much. What line was it? 149. There we go. Show tree is not a member? What do you mean show tree is not a member? It's so totally a member. Oh, so skeleton. Oh, skeleton. I misspelled it. That's the problem. So let's go to 290 skeleton. Okay, that was the problem. Okay, I'm trying to get a feel for where this is. So that shows the skeleton. That shows the tree itself. That makes things bigger. That changes the step size of each branch. What does this do? Must be a width thing, right? Yeah, that looks like it starts. Width is definitely messed up. Gotta get to that. That looks like it changes the starting width or something like this. That definitely changes the decay of the width. And yeah, okay. Alright, I've got my bearings now. So let's deal with this, the width is all messed up thing. It looks to me, where's the angle? There it is. It looks to me like it's just about the wiggle, like positioning those dots is not correct after it figures out the center. Okay, so that is down here on the tree generate. It does, I gotta remember what all this does. So we grab a thickness point. A thickness point is currently the ID and which child we want to do next on that ID. If the next child is 3, then that means we're done. If otherwise, it child, whoa, that is so wrong. I have to get this font rendering figured out. Do you see this 2 right here and how it like doesn't line up with the bottom of it doesn't line up with the 3? That's simply a matter of the hinting in STB being a little bit wonky. It's unfortunate because it's so easy to use, but it just doesn't quite cut it. If it had hinting, I might just settle with it, but if it doesn't get that, then I have to change. Anyway, so grab which child we want to look at. You make a TP out of that child, put it on the top of the stack. Okay, yeah, so this all happens right here. Split point. What does that do? Rotate p dot vert. No, q. Oh man. Okay, so p is the position of the center, and q is the basically what the split point function computes is the wiggle amount, and then this rotates it. And either this is wrong or the rotation is wrong. Okay. I didn't really change split point, but I might be passing it the wrong parameters. It seems more likely to me that it's the math that's messed up. So let me check rotate. Yes, I remember having to do this twice. So here's the vec2. V, right? Vita. Okay. I'm gonna pull up mischief because I still fail at this. No, thank you. Does it show up on OBS? I gotta check. It does. Okay. So I have a vector that I want to rotate. Well, the way I do this is I start with this vector. If that's a 1 and that's a 0, and I want to rotate it by a certain amount, then as I rotate it, the x is decreasing and the y is increasing. And cosine starts at 1 and drops down, whereas sine starts at 0 and goes up. So y is a sine. The x position is the sine of y. No. Okay, so the x position of this in relation to x and y is y contributes to nothing because it's 0. And it's the cosine of x, right? Then your y becomes, oh, I think I see the issue. Is that because that should be an x, your y should be the sine of x? I think that's the issue right there. Yeah, because the y of this is basically, it starts at 0 and goes towards 1 right about the time that hits 0, which is sine, means that the y value of this thing is sine x, or this one, or s. Okay. Okay. Let's see if that does me any better. Whoops, don't want that. That looks much better. It's not actually that good looking, but it is much better looking. Okay. So that does that. I think the, I don't like the look of this branch here or this branch. This still has the same placement problem that I had with it before, which was that if I look at it, like this branch here isn't actually properly centered along the skeleton. Like, my math is right. I did the right math to get the thing I said I wanted, but it didn't actually lead to the effect I wanted on the brown lines, because like this touches there and it doesn't run parallel to the silver line, which is what I would want it to do. I want those to run. The only time it shouldn't run parallel is if it comes to a single point there. Zerakan asks, what is the tree generator for? Is it for testing if the math stuff works? No, it's for testing 4coder. So it's my editor here is the real project that I've been working on. This is 4coder. I am developing that. This is all so that a project for me to work on sort of in 4coder, see if it interrupts my thinking cycles in any important ways that I have to work on and stuff like that. And to figure out which feature I'm missing most when I'm working. And the reason I'm doing a tree generator specifically is because it seemed like it was something I didn't know too well. So I thought it would be a good way to, test against something real. What to do today? There's a couple of things. The two big things I need to work on is the skeleton needs to not collide with itself anymore. And these the brown parts need to run parallel to the silver. But I'm more excited about this, getting rid of this collision problem, because now that the skeleton is separated out, and it does in a different order its configuration. That is, if you're looking at this, it used to go like this around. It would do depth first. And the problem with that was, as it was going left to right, going depth first, it would generate this whole left branch first, and then when it went to generate this, it would if I just said don't do lines that are going to collide, it would quite clearly be biasing towards the side you went from first. But now that we're going breadth first on the skeleton part, we can get to the point where we go, okay, these guys are going to collide, and we'll realize that at the same time, and we can sort of randomly pick okay, at this layer I want to do these branches in a random order or something. And it'll just be better for managing collisions, I think. But for now, how should I go about preventing them? It'd be the easiest thing I could think of would be to say, if you're about to generate a line that's going to collide with another line, don't generate that line. So you just need a way to check a line versus collisions against other lines. And then it's a matter of looping across all the existing lines. That does mean that each line you create becomes you know, it's an ON problem to add a new branch then to the skeleton, which means maybe I want to think of a clever way of only testing against sort of relevant branches so I can cull down a lot of them. It'll be interesting to see. But I think either way I'm going to need a primitive for two lines that collide. And then the question is, do I want to throw that in my math file or into the tree-gen file? And the reason I might not throw it into the math file is I don't want to put things in there that I don't think of as extremely general. I'm going to put it here for now because I might want to I might want to mutate it for other purposes. I have to do one more thing. I forgot to actually build my changes to 4coder custom. Tree-gen. Okay. Right there. Perfect. Okay. So I want to know segment collide, basically. And to define segments, I'll just have 4 vectors. So segments A and B, do they collide? Is the question. And how do I want to go about doing that? So it could definitely be a linear algebra thing, I think. And I know this is one that has always annoyed me when I get to it. So if that's A and B, you have like 1, 2, 1, 2. Alright, I gotta think quickly. Basically, you could conceive of turning these into a system of equations and solving for that system of equations, and then figuring out if the solution you found is actually in the range between 1 and 2 on both lines. Okay, so that's one option. To solve for a system of equations, first I'd have to convert this into 2 equations, which I would then put into a matrix. So how difficult would that be? Let's see, that would be a matter of point 1. What is the equation for a line given 2 points? It's sort of like, it's a version of y equals mx plus b. So if I start with that, and then I need y. Actually, the problem is that x is going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's not pretty. X plus, and to find b, b is the y-intercept. How do you find that? Well, what you could do is you could say that you don't care about the y-intercept, you care about some other point. Right? Is that how you do that? Oh, I feel like I don't remember my basic equations as well as I should do it this way. So you could make an equation by saying that x equals point, or x1 plus t x2 minus x1, and that y equals y1 plus t y2 minus y1. and then to solve for t, subtract that, and divide by the other one, right? Ubi Sora, I am looking for the collision between two segments. I'm sure there's a sort of general way to do it, but I haven't memorized the best way. So what I'm trying to do is figure out how to turn it into a system of equations and see if that's going to be good or if I want to use another idea that I have. So, solving for t on both of these, I have t equals, let's see, x minus x1 over x2 minus x1 equals y minus y1 over y2 minus y1. Cross multiply all that, you get x minus x1, y2 minus y1 equals y minus y1, x2 minus x1. And then to finally get your equation, you want something like x, y2 minus y1. See, this seems like x2 minus x1. Whoops. This seems like too much complexity for the thing I want to do. Because then on the other side, I get, so that finally gives me the A and B of each equation, of those two segments for the matrix, and then I need to know what that equals, which would be, I gotta get used to this, which would be x, y2 minus y1, minus y, x2 minus x1. Which suggests you want to pull that out into like an A and a B thing, so it's like xa plus yb equals that shouldn't be x and y again, that should be x1 and y1 equals x1a plus y1b. And so that would give me, which equals C, one row of the matrix plus whatever that thing equals. You'd have to do all of this twice, so you have a subtraction, two multiplications, and an addition. And you have to do all of that twice, and that would give you your system of equations, and then you'd have to run the solver on it, which is not easy. So before I go chasing that down, the other way I could do this is to rotate the whole problem so that A is vertical. And that's not too hard, because I have vector rotation down already. If you rotate the whole problem so that A is vertical, what I would end up with is I would always have 1 going up towards 2 on A, and B going like so, and then what you would do is you'd say, okay, there's an x position here, what is the y value of this line on this x position? So what does it take to do the rotation? That's pretty important. So if you just did 2 rotations together, you would only need to compute cosine and sine once, but that's a cosine and a sine. And then you could rotate both of those via, what does my rotate do? Oops, Control open, math, rotate. Cosine, sine, 4 multiplications, an addition and a subtraction. X plus minus. This part has to be done twice, and that's just for a rotation. But then solving it is a lot simpler from there, because you take the x of that, oops, take 1x, you can use that to find y, because that's just a system. Yeah, it looks like you end up having to do about the same amount of work, because this still needs to be turned into a system, like an equation, so you can find out the y, and you still have to do one comparison. So I don't know that that will be better, which means I think I want to pursue this route. So if I have A, B, and C, 1 and 2, my naming scheme already has conflicts. I almost always end up with naming conflicts when I'm doing math. I'm so bad at, like, paying attention to that. Okay. Solving this isn't that hard, is it? I want to, it's like a series of a few steps, and you want to treat, I think, you want to treat this as a pair, and this as a pair the whole time. And then to solve it, it's like take the whole, this whole thing, you do one divide, right? Or, yeah, you multiply the bottom by, so I'll call this like R1 and R2. So you do R1 times, or R2 times A1 over A2. Maybe I could use a thinner brush. Nope, that doesn't make it thinner. There we go. How do I make those go away? Perfect. Okay. And then you do R2 minus R1. Those both go into R2. After that, so that's like a division and 3 multiplications, 3 subtractions. After that, you'd have a 0 there, and you could take the top. What order do you want to do that in? Because you want to eliminate the top now, so you probably take the top and do R1 times B2 over B1, right? And that goes into R1, because that should eliminate, or that should get that ready for elimination. And then you do R1 minus R2 into R1, and then finally you just do R1 divided by A1, R2 divided by A2, or B2. And the reason you do all that is then you have the identity matrix here. And all the transformations you apply to this to find the identity matrix will have, how does it work? Since you started with M, and you knew that mx equaled y, we'll say, and then you applied transformations to M such that you got this equation, you then get x equals this, right? So while we're going, we turn this into the identity matrix. So all the transformations, we're basically multiplying that by this on both sides. And then when we're done with that multiplication, we have solved for x, right? So that's why that works for finding the solution. So let me look at this and see if I can rip this out. So what we need is step 1. Let me put this right here in regen. Actually, I'm going to just close that. And I'm going to go into windowed mode so I can do these side by side. Perfect. Alright, cool. So let me zoom out of this a little bit. I have basically row 1 and row 2. And I want row 1 dot x to equal the computation for A, which is A1 and A2. So right, so A2 dot y minus A1 dot y. Right, because I'm grabbing this from the first equation, storing that into A. R1 dot y equals A2 dot x minus A1 dot x, right? That's what it says there. Now, there could totally be a mistake in here somewhere. And then this won't work. That's fine. That's what you gotta do. And then C equals x1 times A plus y1 times B goes into C. So there's 1. And now for R2 it's the same thing, but I use my, whoops, that didn't do what I wanted. Copy, paste, there we go. Must not have hit the key actually. Alright, so now all of these just need to be B, and since I don't have replace yet, I have to do them by hand. That'll just take a second. That's weird. Anyway, there looks to be a little bit of a bug there. And these R1s need to become R2s. I think I messed that up when I was editing it. Okay. So I think that should get me the rows of my matrix and my y vector in the z spot. And why are you so messed up? There we go. Now we just need to apply these rules. So R2 times equals A1 over A2. So that's R1 dot x divided by R2 dot x. Okay, R2 minus equals R1. Okay, what do we have after that? R1 times equals B2 over B1. Okay, and then R1 minus equals R2. Sure, and then dividing, I didn't even finish this drawing, but that should have arrow R1, arrow R2. Then R1 divided by equals A1. That's R1 dot x R2 divided by equals R2 dot y. Okay, so the mapping there is a little weird because like A1 means R1 dot x and B2 means R2 dot y and stuff. So mapping not too great with that. I hope that you're able to follow along with me. But anyway, that should do it, which means that the collision point is now stored in the z parts of these vectors. So specifically, where they collided was z r2 dot z goes into that. So there's your collision point, and the question is just, did that go outside of the bounds? I keep hitting space on this one when I mean to switch to mischief first. They go outside of the bounds of either of these segments. So that's maybe the part I didn't think all the way through. I don't know how I will know if it went beyond the bounds of those too easily. Well, I could just, if it's correct, then I can just look at the x coordinate, unless one of them is vertical, in which case I have to look at its y coordinate. That seems good. So to check the first one, I want to ask, is the a1.x not equal to a2.x? Then we'll check it via x, and that means we want to know, basically we have out of bounds. First, we should actually check for zero division here. I'll get back to that. That could happen because if these two things are parallel, that's what would happen. And then they wouldn't have collision, obviously. So I'll just actually call this result, and we'll pop it up at the very top, and we'll say at the beginning that there is a collision, I think. And if we find out that there's not a collision at any point, we just mark it as such. So if CL.x is less than A1.x, or CL.x is greater than A2.x, then the result equals 0. It is not colliding. Else, can't check by x, have to check by y. We're going to assume that this is possible, so I'm not going to check if y's are the same. Because if x's and y's were the same, then the branch, then the line has specified by the same point twice. So we're going to say that's not allowed. But this does suggest that the only problem with this is it forces that A1 and A2 are like, yeah, okay, there's a small problem there. Let me think about that. So it's not necessarily true that A1.x is smaller and A2.x is larger. What I actually want is sort of something like this. So to do that range thing real quick is just a matter of R32 range as a struct with real 32 small and large, and then R32 range, get range 32A, real 32B, and if A is less than B, else, and we want a result right there that we can return. One second. Okay, that does work. That does not work. Interesting. It's not auto-tabbing that return for some reason. It's auto-tabbing like other stuff. Also, that R looks fuzzier at that position than that position. That's weird. It's just crisper at certain positions, which means it's a subpixel positioning problem, which I'm sort of aware of, but it's annoying. Okay, small equals A, large equals B. Large equals A. Cool, so that handles the A1 vector. Or, yeah, that handles A vectors. I have to handle the B stuff. B, 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 A. Okay. I want to return a result out of this one. Cool. Should wrap it up. Okay. There's one other thing. This one right here. I want to say if r1.x equals 0 or r2.x or r2.y equals 0, else we can go on and do all of this. Fingers crossed that auto tab is with me. Yes. And then result equals 0. No collision. Okay. Does that build? Not at all. Alright. Gotta go quick. Here we go. What's the first error? 94. Huh? I have sort of those types, right? Real 32. Was I calling it R32 in this project by chance? Why can't I find an example? Yeah, it's no, that's the one I just made. R32 range. No, it's totally real 32. Do you see how, like, it looks all terrible? That's because the Y is at a subpixel position right now. And just looks terrible when that happens. Okay. Whew. Why don't you like that? I started a struct R32 range. Does anyone see a problem with that? Does anyone see a problem with that? Real 32 followed by char is illegal. Did you forget a semicolon? What? What? I have no idea what it's talking about. Followed by char. Alright, let me try just using a different name. Okay, that might have. I have no idea why that name would have mattered. Small. Start. And it's very peculiar. Oh man, when did I do that? That looks all messed up. I don't have an undo either. Did I accidentally copy something? Or cut it? No, I don't have it on my clipboard. Shoot. Okay. So, lost some stuff there accidentally. Don't have undo yet, which sucks. This is where it should say if cl.x is less than range start. This is where it should say if a1.x does not equal a2.x. What am I doing on time? Gotta wrap this up so quick. Alright, as soon as it's building and running, well, just whatever it's running, that's what I'm done with today. R1, R2. Actually, it'll run the same exact way because I haven't even started invoking this function yet. I need the range line, of course. Alright, what's left? Vec3 does not define that operator. That is good. That is fine. CL, undeclared identifier, line 137. Ah, I lost that too. Okay. Vec3, Vec2, CL, CL.x equals R1.z, CL.y equals R2.z. Line 147. Okay. Now we can get back to where I should have been working. Small, large, there we go. Alright, so nothing has changed when it's running yet, but I have this collision function now, so next time I can maybe cull out branches that are going to collide, so that'll be cool. Thank you for coming to check out the stream. If you missed a part and you want to check out the archive, it'll be on YouTube at slash Mr. Fourth Dimension is the name of the channel. And you can check out 4coder at 4coder.net. Anyway, thanks for coming.